The opposition between life and death, between good and bad, between pleasure and pain, is extraordinarily impressive. The second half of life is a preparation for death. That to Western ears is a very gloomy enterprise. We pretend death doesn't happen. We sweep people under the carpet. When you're dying in hospital, everybody comes around and says, "Oh, you'll soon be better." And then, the poor dying patient notices there's a hollow look in their eyes, that they're just consoling. And that's terrible. When somebody is dying in hospital, you ought to come around and say, "Listen, you're going to die. Do you realize you're going to die?" It's an occasion for an immense celebration. Because if you accept that you're going to die, you can let go of yourself. And you won't be a nuisance to yourself anymore. And so we should have a champagne party, or we should have sacraments according to taste. There should be some very special conscious entry into death of letting go of oneself. Because you only die once, and it should be a very important event. This is this terrible American way of death, which does not accept it, which pretends it doesn't happen, and doesn't see that death is the most life-giving thing there is. I don't think that in this general tradition we really get down to seeing how revivifying death is. That, in other words, if in the course of life you die, before you die physically, if you accept the fact that you are completely disintegrating, and there's nothing you can do to hold on to yourself, and nothing you can do to be safe or secure, you come alive. Now, everybody imagines they can be secure. You have investments, insurance, etc., etc., etc. But this doesn't make the slightest difference, because the whole world is falling apart. When you were born, you were kicked off the edge of a precipice. And it's pure illusion to console yourself by clinging on hard to a rock that's falling down with you. There's no way of not disintegrating. The whole thing's falling apart, and people have been saying ever since 6000 BC, when we've got records going back there, that the world was going to the dogs. It is. Life is something that's always falling apart. But if you get with it, in other words, you accept the situation, you flow with it, you come alive. Because you acquire courage. You're not defending yourself all the time. You acquire energy, because you're not all locked up wondering what's going to happen next. You get the capacity to take risks, and you can't have a free people unless you're willing to take risks. It's all gambling. This falling apart of everything, which incidentally is what makes it alive. Change is life. This is the Tao. And to flow with the Tao and not fight it, you see, flow with the stream. This is the next great principle of Taoism, which is called Wu Wei. Wu. This means, in Chinese, negative, not. And Wei means interfering. But Wu Wei means not acting against the grain of nature. Acting in accordance with it. And the best possible example of Wu Wei is the art of sailing. You see, it's much more intelligent to put up a sail than to use oars, because you don't have to work so hard. So a higher form of intelligence would erect a sail. A lower form would just row. But when you sail, you cannot sail directly against the wind. If you want to sail in a direction contrary to the wind, you must tack. So in the same way, if you get caught in an overwhelming current when you're swimming, you can't turn around and swim against it. You'll drown in a hurry that way. But what you can do is you can swim with it and edge out. So this is the basic philosophy of what is called in Japanese judo. Do is the Japanese way of pronouncing Dao, the gentle way. And in judo, you overcome a violent opponent, not by direct opposition, but by using the opponent's strength to bring about his own downfall. A clever artist, when he is using wood, he studies the grain. And he looks at the grain in a block of wood and asks, what does it want to be? So great potters don't simply impose their will on the clay. They feel the texture of the clay, and they have the sense that when they throw a pot on the wheel, the pot grows of itself. When you skillfully make music, you feel that the music is singing through you. So this is the principle of Wu Wei. We have all kinds of common expressions, like roll with the punch, like Shakespeare saying there is a tide in the affairs of men which taken at its flood leads on to fortune. We have an innate folk wisdom which realizes that this is a fundamental principle. So whereas the emphasis in the Confucian tradition, China, is on interference to a large extent, keeping things in order. There's a certain anxiety about the whole thing. The emphasis of Taoism is to trust in the course of nature, about which I have to tell you two Chinese stories, both about farmers and their sons. One evening, the farmer's son came in very, very late from the fields, after all the rest of the family, and was late for dinner. And they said to him, what are you doing? Oh, he said, I've been helping the corn to grow. Next morning, when everybody got up, they found that all the corn was dead. Because what he had done late the night before was that every new shoot of corn, he had pulled it up a little to make it higher. Another story that is told is about the farmer who lost a horse, ran away. And all his friends came round, said, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. The next day, the horse returned, and it brought 7 wild horses with it. And they said, my, that's great. And he said, maybe. The next day, his son, in attempting to train one of these horses, was thrown and broke a leg. And everybody came around and said, oh, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. The next day, the conscription officers came around and rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And everybody came to congratulate him and said, isn't that great? And he said, maybe. So you see, this farmer was with the course of things. And he knew it goes this way and it goes that way. It goes up and it goes down. Because if it didn't go down, you would never know you were up. And if you try to be permanently up, or always right, you're trying to arrange everything in this room so that everything is up and nothing is down, or that everything's on the front and there's no back. And that is an impossible state of affairs.
When life gets busy, pause, take a breath, and reset your mind. Download Mindset and listen to your favorite inspirational speeches to unlock your full potential.